this part of the workshop is really about what does CCMA's goals and the commitment of this network, what does this have to do with my project, right? So this is not springing forth from the head of Zeus. CCMA has been involved in a collective impact, let me put it at conversation, for quite a number of years, actually going way back to the genesis of our organization. We really felt that from the very get-go, we wanted our member institutions to have the opportunity to be involved with a more robust, rigorous conversation and collaborative effort than just receiving member benefits, one of which could be seen as the VISTA grant. That's a significant member benefit. But we also wanted to raise the question, what does, if anything, what could higher ed be doing for and with its community partners collectively to improve community life in the region? And from our very first President's Council meeting back in 2009, we put that question in front of our presidents and said, do you want to do anything together above and beyond just receiving normal member benefits, grants, resources, et cetera? And lo and behold, they said yes. Well, then we came back together the next year, having had multiple stakeholder meetings with our SAGE leadership, with our community engaged practitioners and directors, putting some ideas in front of them. And we said, so what, or now what? In other words, what do you want to do together? And they, at that time, actually selected education. They said, okay, we're educators, let's stay in our lane, let's work with education. Great. So another year of conversations. This is the classic higher ed and the molasses in the freezer. We all know that this is the first time in the then region of Maryland that public, private, 2-year and 4-year had been engaged in a collective conversation around what could we accomplish if we really put our shoulders to the wheel together. And they came back and they said, so what, now what? What about education? That's a big, broad brush stroke. And they picked
CCMA.
P20, they picked K-12 partnerships at that time. Then we came back together again. And the following year in our President's Council meeting, the so what, now what, they picked college readiness, which I actually thought was brilliant because it's higher ed skin in the game. That's not going away. College completion is what college is and should be held to the wall for across all of the sectors of higher ed. And you can't get to completion without readiness. So thus birthed the beginning, the embryo of the P20 Connects partnership. We then did a year-long task force. They came up with a white paper, and that was a multi-sectoral. We had K-12 in the room with us. We had some community partner organizations and out-of-school partners in the room. Then we came forward with an action plan, but it wasn't until after the action plan that we got the first VISTA grant. And we began to say, well, we're working with these 30 VISTA grants. Why don't we begin the process of rolling this out through our VISTA program? So that's when Jim Walters became deeply involved with the effort. And we have had several different VISTA members along the way. And that's how we got to where we are. And I have to pass the baton to them quite soon. But the relevance piece is that this is now going, even though we're still staying focused on college, career, and civic readiness, and specifically advancing equity through college, career, and civic readiness, like we can do that with projects that are not strictly K-12. So if you think of all the nonprofits, all the partnerships, all the programs that are going on, this becomes collective impact. And we have to come to agreement about a few common indicators in order to then assess what, if any, difference we're making. And I'm convinced that we're going to be making, are already, and are going to be making huge differences. but it's going to be around the developing global citizens and building just communities. Because the change that we're going, and this whole process is moving beyond hope. Well, I don't know if there's ever moving beyond hope, but it's channeling hope into change. So it's taking all the different programs and letting them have all the diversity and the variety that are there, because we can learn from that diversity, but channeling them into some common indicators that we will assess. And nobody's going to force your arm, but we really want you to consider joining with us in that conversation, helping us figure out those indicators, and then helping us figure out how to assess it. And it's got to be assessed at your level. No external agency is going to come in and assess that, but we can use common assessment tools. We can decide that together. And it's really a together. No one entity can do this. I mean, we have a tiny team really working with you all to co-develop this. And Jim and his team and all of you who have been participating in these P20 Connects projects for a number of years have already developed a lot that we can learn from as we move forward with this. But that's the big picture. Sorry for the going over my 10 minutes, Jim, and I will hand it over to you.
Madeline, thank you for your opening, obviously, and kind of the overview. I I was thinking about, you're linking this to like the kind of the long vision for CCMA and the whole kind of strategic plan that is being developed. And so I'm going to try and go there a bit and not repeat what you already said. And if I get out of line with the strategic plan, then I'm sure that you'll, help me get back on the rails. But, our purpose here today is not for us to tell anybody anything about their programs or how they need to do their programs. It's truthfully about how collectively we might come together to think about the work we're doing, how we might assist each other to really move agendas which are already solid and robust, to collectively say, this is what the influence that CCMA has in DC, Maryland, and Delaware. End of story. That's really what we're beginning to open up the conversation about. And Madeline talked about assessment, and that's absolutely true. It's also change. What are we presenting as change, and how do we see that as positively, impacting not only the individuals, the citizens, but also the communities that we are working with to empower them to take charge of this work. Because sum total, we're in work that we should be trying to figure out how we get ourselves out of the work. Because the whole point here is that citizens, communities, and people understanding their skills and their abilities can take on, in many instances, some of the work that we do. Now, there are certainly, many opportunities for services. There's no question about that. But, how might we move from kind of a, we're providing for you mentality to kind of a different mentality of where we are looking at providing grounding for our constituents and our communities to move forward on their own in some ways. And that truthfully is what this whole collective impact process is about. Yeah, this grows out of, as Madeline might have suggested, the whole P20 uh, uh, connects work. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. I just want to thank all the folks that allowed us to work with you and your vistas for the past 2.5 years to learn about this, because we would not be having these conversations in the kind of depth that I think that we will be having over time if you and your vistas had not participated in really helping us explore how do we engage more effectively uh, beyond program and into people and growth, I guess, would be my thought. So we're building truthfully on this P20 Connects process, where we learned from like a third of the organizations or the programs that are in this Vista, the CCMA Vista program, about how they engage and how they work, and how might we develop this more effectively. And truthfully, the thing that came out of our conversations was, how do we share? And it is not isolated kind of this is my program, this is your program. This is, how does this work for our tri-state area? How does this relate to the vision and mission of CCMA with respect to equity, with respect to developing citizens, with respect to developing global citizens, with respect to all of the work that CCMA uh, is about. So truthfully, today, this is not a we're going to give you the checklist and you check it off and we're going to move forward from there. This is the beginning of a conversation about how we collectively come together to share truthfully, and I don't mean this in to share truthfully our wisdom, our experience, and our knowledge, because the 40 some folks of you that are on this Zoom meeting bring a huge amount of understanding, a huge amount of experience, and a huge amount of not only individual but community development uh, to this process. And this whole collective impact idea is, how do we embrace that? How do we share that? And what is happening at PG Community College, or at Wesley Theologic, or at Georgetown, or at Frostburg? How do we get all of those ideas and those understandings moving in a similar direction to address, obviously, those wicked problems, those hard to solve problems that continually perpetuate inequity and poverty and all of those kinds of social issues that we're all dealing with severally. How do we come together to think about, how might we not only, as Madeline said on Friday, and she may have said earlier, but I was kicked off, how do we know what we're doing? And we know it because of the expertise that's in this room. And how do we show it? We show it by some kind of collective assessment, some kind of understanding about the vision that we're working on, and how we share our impact, to be truthful. And so I too am watching time, because we do have a lot to go through. This was not what I had necessarily prepared, but it comes from many years of working and thinking about this. And at some point, I'll get to hopefully at least say who I am and why I'm on this Zoom thingy talking to you. Because, yeah, because I think that would be cool. So, I think our next step should be, what is this all about? As opposed to let's talk about it. Let's move into a collective experience that says this is really what this is about, and then we will kind of explicate and uh, unravel that in some discussion and conversation. I would like to say before I quit, everybody in this conversation is helping us move this agenda forward. This is not, here's the agenda, here's where we're going. We're talking about, here is a process, here's where we're looking at going. We're looking at college, career, civic readiness, uh, community development, just like Madeline said, but we're working at this together. This is not a imposition. This is no more work for you nor your vistas than is already happening. It's just kind of looking at it somewhat differently. And I hope that this video kind of lays that out.
This is just a quick introduction into what is a collective impact initiative, because this is a structure that is tried and true across many different types of social action programs. And it's kind of what we've already got going at CCMA. So we'll just run the video and then we'll see how we relate to it. And here we go.
The projects that you're going to be working on, if you've already worked on projects or you're thinking about projects at WPI. And I want to talk to you a little bit about it in the context of broader change and broader impact. We use that word a lot, the word impact, to try to describe where we might go in terms of impacting lives, impacting communities. And today I want to talk to you about how you as students actually have probably the most original and exciting opportunity to impact people's lives through the project learning model that we use here at WPI, but in a way that I think is going to be very unique in the context of a larger movement to affect what's called collective impact. So I'm going to talk to you, first of all, what is collective impact? Collective impact is a concept that's actually not a new one in terms of action, but it's a new one in terms of the way it's been defined. Collective impact is something that Mark Kramer and John Cania both wrote about in 2011 in an article called Collective Impact, in which they described what is really one of the challenges of making things happen relative to the most pressing social issues of the day. And that is trying to get the private sector, the public sector, the for-profits, and the nonprofits to actually get together in a unified way to solve problems that challenge us every day. And the view of collective impact is much like these light bulbs. The notion that many people, many organizations, many individuals work on their individual areas and their own individual silos to try to find innovative ways to solve problems. But sometimes what happens is that they, because they're so focused on their own solutions, aren't able to figure out how to solve the bigger problems together. And what I've observed here at WPI, and have really had the pleasure of seeing in action, is that our project-based learning, to some degree, may be the magic bullet that allows us to, as individuals and you as students, to really help those organizations that often struggle to figure out how to solve problems, help them solve problems, not just on your individual projects, but in terms of solving problems that are community-wide, worldwide, and global. There are actually 5 conditions to what we mean to successful collective impact. So Cania and Kramer talk about these, and they really do make sense when you hear them, and they're sort of intuitive. And what I'm going to be doing is just try to describe how they come together and how they fit with you. The first is common agenda. Now that seems kind of obvious. Yeah, if I'm going to work on a project, if I'm going to make something happen, if I want to be able to do, for example, the things that we do here at WPI, like bring mentorship programs to orphans in Morocco, or to bring sustainable innovations to communities in shanty towns in Cape Town, or if we want to think about the kinds of projects that we work on throughout the community worldwide, we recognize we need to know how to do it, and we need to do it all with a common vision. But the problem that you run into in terms of a common agenda is that typically what we end up with is governmental entities have a particular way of doing things. For-profit organizations have a particular way of doing things. Individual community members have a particular way that they want to see things happen. And what you end up struggling with is a community where sometimes we go off in our own different directions. What I've observed in terms of students and projects, and I'm going to give you some tangible examples, is that what you do as students, and we've heard this theme today several times, as part of a project-based learning, is you ask questions instead of talking. You think instead of reacting. You become part of the conversation, not by saying, this is the way it ought to be done, but by trying to figure out how it ought to be done with the people in the community. And to me, that is what allows people to have a conversation about what is it we really believe is our common agenda. What are we trying to accomplish together? So the first phase, the first piece we need to think about is this common agenda. The second is, and this is going to start, and I am a business professor, I'm actually a finance professor, so I think in terms of numbers, but numbers ultimately come from the basis of measuring things collectively. And I think as a university dedicated to STEM, a university where we have scientists who think in terms of measurement, we understand that an agenda without outcomes is no more than an agenda or a strategy without execution. And so the next critical phase in terms of getting these varied constituencies together to think about a complex solution to a problem, say the use of water worldwide, or to fight hunger worldwide, or to deal with sustainable environmental issues, is to make sure that we not only know that we're on the same page in terms of what we want to do, but we're on the same page in terms of how we value and measure our effectiveness in getting those things done. So Kania and Kramer definitely emphasize that that is an absolutely important activity. What it does is it allows you to have a conversation, a dialogue, in which you actually are able to say to one another, A, we know what we're about, and B, we know what we want to achieve, but more important, we aren't going to get in each other's way either. So the third condition that's very important in terms of the concept of collective impact is mutually reinforcing activities. The notion that if I do something, I have to recognize there are things that are important to you. So if I'm part of a nonprofit organization and I want to be able to support my constituents in my nonprofit organization, I have to be aware that maybe you as students have some different needs, some different expectations, or you as business people have different needs or different expectations. And I have to figure out where we can be helpful and reinforce success for each of our respective sets of needs. So mutually reinforcing activities is important. And then continuous communication. This isn't something you start with on day one and then say, here's our agenda, here's how we're going to measure, and we don't continue the discussion. You figure out how we can continue to work together. And then finally, and perhaps most important, and where I see project-based education playing the most critical role, is you need backbone organizations. Backbone organizations in terms of social change, in terms of social impact, are organizations that don't have a single agenda. They have the agenda of the group as a whole together. So in the theory, in the sort of published theory, the idea is we should have somebody who's essentially a neutral player sitting at the table, asking good questions, making sure we're measuring, making sure we understand what the agenda is, and making sure people are essentially playing together well, working together, thinking about those mutually reinforcing activities. I believe that fundamentally, whoops, and I've just shut off. I think fundamentally that the idea of collective impact actually does work. And I'm going to give you a case study, one that I actually had an opportunity to live, and then I'm going to give you a...
We're actually going to stop right there before they get into the examples, because we are our own example. And let me put the slides back up. So I hope that video really resonated with some of you. And I know it resonates with us as Campus Compact Mid-Atlantic, because the whole structure here really represents our VISTA program very clearly. And this whole conversation is just about how can we make ourselves align even more with those concepts. And so let me show you. This is what we have put together as a diagram showing, you know, the 5 conditions of collective impact that we just saw in the video, kind of the details of what they mean, and then how they track on to what we're talking about here at CCMA. So in that right-hand column, you see the CCMA VISTA program collective impact model. And this is what we've been thinking about, talking about, forming through years with the pilot program P20 Connects, as Madeline and Jim were saying. And as you can see, we have common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and then backbone support. And so just to put this at the front, we see Campus Compact Mid-Atlantic as the backbone organization here, who doesn't really have one particular activity or agenda, but is really focused on the agendas and the activities happening with all of our different programs, and how can we provide support to ensure that they're all aligned with a common agenda. So hopefully this will come up. So first, we are going to talk about the common agenda just to see how you all feel like you already fit in with this agenda. So as you see in the right-hand column, we have determined that our common agenda as, you know, social change practitioners working in the higher education sphere is really to develop skills, attitudes, and understandings necessary for college, career, and civic readiness. And actually, if we go back to, kind of going off script here, but if we go back to the vision of CCMA, it is the development of globally engaged citizens who actively contribute to their communities. So through fostering college, career, and civic readiness, that is our vision. Our vision of how we get to our vision, if you will. So the common agenda is kind of the first step. So we wanted to make this more of a conversation. So we're hoping to have our first breakout discussion. Hopefully everything goes well in figuring out these breakout rooms. And so the question that we want you to ask in groups of 3 or 4, maybe 5, we'll see what happens, is given your program and the structure of your program, how are you already, or how might you look at college, career, and civic readiness outcomes or indicators, and what might be some opportunities or obstacles in aligning yourself to look at those outcomes and indicators. And by outcomes and indicators, that really is whatever you think right now. I mean, obviously, we all have ideas about what it is that makes somebody ready for college, career, and civic engagement. So think about what might be some things that would make people ready for these to be engaged citizens, and how is your program and structure already, or will be if you're a new supervisor, aligning with this kind of common vision. Madeline, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that, and depending on your program, depending on your project, it might be with one of those 3. So it might be more with college readiness, or more with career readiness, or more with the civic and community readiness, so to speak.
Absolutely. So the way that we're going to do the breakout rooms, Sarah is going to run them in just a moment. And we're requesting so we can capture all of the great conversation you all are having, because there's so many of you, it would be very hard to debrief. We're requesting that one person in the group acts as the scribe and takes down all of the notes of what you are all talking about, and then just sends those notes in an email to lal, L-A-L, at ccmidatlantic.org. That's Sarah's email. And we're just going to capture everything you guys are talking about in the email so that we can come back to them later. And it would be helpful if you can put, you know, your names and your programs so that we know who's saying what. Maybe if you want to, in your once you're in the breakout room, you'll have your own chat box. If you're just writing in the chat and then the scribe can kind of copy paste from there, that might be a good way to go about it. So whatever you guys think. And I will turn it over. Jim, Madeline, Sarah, anybody?
No, I think that's great. Just think, folks, about writ large. It's not college necessarily specific, it's skill specific. It's not career specific, it's skill specific. It's not civic readiness specific, it's skills. And they, of course, are all blending and interrelated. So think big and help us here to move, to begin to think about how we can move this agenda.
Does anybody want to share out some major themes? Just, if anything was really, consistent across everybody in your group and you kind of had agreed on it, if there's anything there, it'd be helpful if you would share, or maybe throw it in the big chat if you don't want to speak up. But we thought we'd leave a little time here for any serious opportunities or obstacles to be addressed.
So I don't know if I can be heard, but I had something I did get out of this that I'd be happy to share.
Perfect.
I'm Eliza from the Civic Circle.
Hi, Eliza. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Good to see you. Jim is a leading thinker in this space, and I thank you for your work, Jim.
Oh, walk away, yeah.
So, Anthony from Townsend made an incredible point in our group that was so brilliant that I just want to share it right now. And it has to do with how you measure impact, because our group tends to measure impact like we measure at the beginning of the program, what do they know? And then at the end of the program, we measure again. And Anthony was saying that they measure at every step of the way. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating, Anthony, but it seems almost to the point where every time you have a contact with a person, you get some feedback right away. And I thought, that's brilliant. We need to be checking in with our students every 4 weeks and say, what do you think of this unit you just had? Just a lot more assessment over time makes a lot of sense. That's such a brilliant suggestion. And I thank you for it, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really, really insightful.
And not to thread too hard here, but when we get into the assessment piece, that's really what we're thinking about, how we might think about that whole assessment stuff for it to be developmental, as opposed to, we start at the beginning of the semester and then where are we at the end? So Eliza and Anthony, thank you for that big time, and look forward to your comments when we get into that in our next section. So back to you.
Yeah.
Sorry for overstepping or interrupting, but go.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share, or we can move on?
Jordan had some really good comments.
Oh, all righty. I'm sure my colleagues on here from BSU, Rob or Sharon, can tap in on some of the comments that I was going to add to the conversation. But with regards to the civic engagement initiatives that are given down from our University of Maryland system, as well as the president's office, some of the tenets that we're focused on is political activism, environmental action, and community service. The goal is for our students to have the knowledge, skills, and values to make a difference, whether it's in the political process, volunteer work, or in their communities. Some of the ways that we assess and are able to kind of look at the success of the program or the initiatives is by using the research that talks about IEO, so inputs, experiences, environments, and outcomes.
Yeah. Right.
According to the research, it has a lot of things that we can look at, whether it be age, disability status, first generation status, pre-college preparation, whatever those inputs, whether it be family, parental education, those are some of the inputs that we can look at when we're talking about experience. our institution and our division of student affairs is working to look at maybe extracurricular activities, work experience, learning community, academic majors, service learning, classroom environment. Those are just some of the experiences that we can look at, which then leads into outcomes, whether it's subject matter, maturation, major job congruence, reasoning, moral development. And we also, as student affairs practitioners, utilize student development theory and wove that into the process. So we may look at Schlossberg's marginality and mattering. We may look at Kohlberg's stages of moral development. We may look at Sanford's theories on all of these things, just to try to make sure that we're reaching whatever indicators and outcomes that we need to make sure our students are successful.
Wow, thank you so much. That was amazing. And yeah, I mean, these are the types of conversations that we're really looking to have as we are considering what are the outcomes we can all kind of agree on, what are some indicators. And this is what we mean by saying you all have such great, professional experience in these fields already, and we just need to provide space for these experiences to be shared. So thank you so much, and we're really looking forward to really getting everything out of this whole conversation as we progress through the spring and into the summer. So thank you so much. And let's just move on for the sake of time. So we are now back here at the 5 conditions of collective impact. I think we've all kind of talked about the common agenda. We're on the same page about college career civic readiness, development of citizens. And now we actually think it makes most sense to talk next loosely. We're kind of using this as a framework, so we can follow along with how and why is this collective impact, but a lot of this is all connected. The communication is what's going to determine the measurement, which is reliant on us having the mutually reinforcing activity. So it's all connected. And next, we're going to talk actually about the mutually reinforcing activities, because this is kind of that idea of all of the light bulbs, like we're all doing all of these programs that are really doing amazing work, but how can we coordinate them to ensure that we're all moving forward and we're sharing ideas and we're getting outcomes? So as you can see, we all have differentiated approaches, but we're looking for some coordination to kind of get on the same page and measure together. So as you can see, for the CCMA side, in a nutshell, what we've written here is organizing for equity, centering self-empowerment, and using reflective practice as a tool in engaging citizens to focus in on these skills, attitudes, and understandings. And we'll get into this a little bit more right now. So let's see here. So really briefly, this is kind of the crux of what we're all working towards, right? When we say mutually reinforcing activities, this could kind of go in line with the common vision as well, but this is a 4 modes of change model that is actually developed by Cormac Russell, who is a big name in collective impact and community organizing. And I think a lot of you will probably resonate with this, in that there are some social programs that are done to communities or individuals. This is the old medical model. Some are done for, maybe considering the needs of the community a little bit more. That's kind of similar to what they call the old charity model. You're doing things for a group or an individual, but you're not really including them in necessarily what it is and determining what that service or program is. And then on the bottom, so this is kind of moving, top, bottom, left, right. So to, for, with, by, to be clear. And then we have with and by. So with is change is done for a community, and it's done with the community. So this is where a lot of our programs probably are right now, and a lot of social programs are, where you are kind of asset mapping the community a little bit, doing, you know, needs surveys, but ultimately the work is still being done by, you know, an organization, whether it be nonprofit, higher ed, you know, there's some kind of funding coming from the top there. And then ultimately we have by, which is change is done by a community for a community. And so this is just a great model for anybody who's looking to do social impact work, of thinking, how can we get to the buy? How can we empower citizens to embrace the work themselves almost? And this is what we're talking about when we say civic readiness, right? We're not necessarily here to say, how are you making your program done by the community, right? That's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to say, how can we support this model by fostering citizens who are going to eventually be doing that by work, right? Who are civically engaged. And so I hope this resonates with everybody. And thinking about our role as, you know, educators or in higher education, as but fostering the development of citizens who are civically engaged and have the knowledge, skills, and understandings to embrace the work that needs to be done, and ultimately be running the buy portion of this. And so with that, we are going to talk a little bit about.
Just to throw in really quick, Taylor,
Yeah.
just because I love all the, but yeah, a real big part of our thinking and thought process too is recognizing the community experts in this buy model part.
Yeah,
and just elevating that standing. So just wanted a little clear. I like that.
Yeah, recognizing community experts, and also, yeah, so of course we want to move our programs towards being buy as much as possible, but also recognizing community experts and also empowering people to recognize that they are the community expert, right? And so right now we're going to shift and I'm going to turn it back over to Jim, and he's going to talk a little bit about how our theory of change in getting or pushing forward the agenda of civic engagement and college and career readiness, and getting these knowledge and skills and attitudes necessary to empower people to realize that they are the community experts and embrace that buy. So with that, I am going to turn over to Jim to talk a little bit about P20 Connects, the pilot program, and the history there.
And this will be brief, but it is also an opportunity for me to introduce myself to everybody, because folks don't necessarily know who I am and why I'm here. I have a lot of experience in, you know, the whole idea of service learning and experiential ed. Have worked to get with community and statewide folks, service learning engaged in community colleges throughout the state. Have done a lot of work in this area. Worked with the National Society for Experiential Ed for years, was president, and at the same time encouraged a experiential education academy, which is much like what Campus Compact is doing now, to inform institutions around the country about how to effectively do this experiential work. Many times folks go, you know, experiential education is learning by doing. It's actually more than that. And it's about developing a reflective practice. In truth, it's about developing how do we think about our thinking, metacognition, as part of the process of engaging with communities, not only with individual that is volunteering or facilitating the work, but also with community folks to think about what gifts and abilities that they actually bring to the conversation. And that truly is the key, or the one of the keys to this whole collective impact process. What we are looking at is not only how do we develop those folks with whom we work, either in academics or in health issues or in community development, how do they understand where they are and where they can go? Um, well, actually, that's the key. How do we help them move from where they are to where they could potentially be? And so um, uh, I think, Taylor, if you roll down, we can, take up less time with how we kind of got here. And, yarns ago, I worked with Madeline when she first came into Maryland to organize Campus Compact, uh, to think with Montgomery County Schools, how might this process actually work? How might we help folks to think about their thinking? Um, the goal of the program actually was, get ESOL students out of high school because they weren't getting the hours in. And our first conversations with the students as they were doing their service activities, the first question was, what is the problem? And their responses were, I don't have a problem. Or we had to wait an hour because the folks weren't ready for us when we got there. And so we began working to get more deeply into what the questions were, and how might our time that we're spending move the students to think more deeply and more reflectively about their work. And we didn't know at the time, because I was thinking, and most of the folks that I was talking with were thinking, well, you're developing some kind of transferable skills. And in truth, what we were developing were folks that were thinking about their thinking, that we were developing reflective practice. And the results for that initial group of 2 years, you can see here. And this was not CCMA's, research or evaluation. This was Montgomery County's Office of Institutional Responsibility and Impact, or
It was the Office of Shared Accountability at Montgomery County Public Schools.
oh, okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that, Madeline. But these are the outcomes that we got. And we got those kinds of outcomes consistently over the 6 years of the program. So that's kind of the, foundational work that we're looking at, that it's not just doing stuff and, making a comment about it. It's how does that move to, real meaning making and kind of active kind of next steps. Our initial stuff with the program, folks were going, it was like, what's your problem? and they were going, I don't have a problem. And then, or the problem was we had to wait an hour kind of thing, just to reaffirm where we are here. Where we got to was, a garden's a lot about like learning. And if I plant today, I can't harvest tomorrow. And I need to understand that I need to do watering and, blah, 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 blah. But, it translated into folks thinking about their thinking. And that's really where we're pushing here, because the research supports it 100%, where years ago we didn't have the brain research, and the outcomes that we are getting from the P20 folks supports that a boatload. So that's where we want to open the conversation up to think about how we all might, collectively get together to look at how we move the agenda towards college, career, civic, personal readiness, development. So I'm going to stop there, and Taylor, hit the slides.
Awesome. Yeah. So this slide here, just for some context, is the research behind basically how we learn, and thinking about why we are trying to center reflection at every point possible. We're creating experiences for people, but then we're pushing them to think about what just happened, and how they might take what they've learned and move forward. And so that can be applied in almost any context, really. So let's see if I just click. Great. And these are the questions that were formed to model that reflective practice, experiential learning cycle that we just had on the last slide. And these are questions that are kind of like a baseline that we had used in the P20 Connects pilot program to sit down with programs and say, how do these questions resonate with what you're doing? How might we tweak these to better fit your program? And at what stages in your program is it appropriate to be asking these questions? And so, Jim, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this a little bit more, but these are just kind of an example of the tools that CCMA has been working on, as a tool, as a resource to provide to the VISTA programs who are wanting to engage in the work. And, it's just to open a conversation, sit down and say, how can we tweak these for your program? And so I don't know if you wanted to add anything else there, Jim.
Yeah, one sentence, that this did not come out of the sky. This comes out of significant research over a number of years, to be able to kind of concretize how we develop this reflective practice in folks' thinking. And it's not that we don't do it, it's just that we don't model it in any of our educational process necessarily. Folks do, but some folks don't. And what we have found is that if we ask folks to think about their thinking, then all of a sudden they are empowered to be able to do a whole boatload of stuff that is not our controlling, it's their controlling. And that's the really critical issue here, because it's not how do we necessarily see college, career, and civic readiness. It's how do our participants see college, career, and civic readiness? And what is the value of that to them, not to us? This is not us in the front of the classroom. This is, you know, your learning. This is your life. This is your movement. And so when you decide you're going to move in this direction or that direction, that's your choice. But our goal is not to teach math, English, or whatever. It's like, how do we self-empower you to engage in what is important to you, what is valuable, and
Yeah.
so.
And it's also important to say that
Mm.
these questions can be applied to any program, right? Not just like an education focused program where,
Absolutely.
you know, it's out of the classroom. You know, maybe these are questions that you're involving in, you know, if you are doing a food security program, maybe if you have like parallel programming of, you know, how to use the food in the pantry to cook a healthy meal, and maybe it's a little class or even a little piece of paper, and then you're inviting people to answer these questions in a way that's, you know, concretizing, if that's a word, making concrete their experience with that class. And they're saying, yeah, you know, I actually really like this recipe. It's inspired me to now look for more similar recipes. And there it is. There's the cycle of learning. There's a cycle of empowerment. And so it can really be used in any context, which is important to say. And so now we are going to actually invite one of our Vistas, Elisa Smedley, who's working at Universities of Shady Grove under Sarah Wells, her supervisor, who is obviously here. And they have been participating in the P20 Connects pilot program and collective impact. And Elisa is going to share a little bit about how she's incorporated these values into her work and the results that she's getting. So, Elisa.
Good morning, everyone. As Taylor mentioned, I'll be talking easily. We were able to incorporate the collective impact concepts into the project. So my name is Elisa Smedley, and at USG, I work with a program called ACES, Achieving Collegiate Excellence and Success. ACES works with first-generation college students who are at USG and high school students from across Montgomery County. We help them to develop the skills, attitudes, and understandings that they will need for STEM or business careers. Much of the program is based on what we've been talking about this morning, experiential and active learning techniques. We've done extensive tracking of our student assessments, reflections, and learning outcomes, and we've discovered that these strategies work, experiential and active learning. So I'd like to briefly share two of the activities that we are doing within ACES that will show you how this can be, you know, a practical application, how it can be done. First, we've included a student poll in our monthly newsletter, and the topic is habits of the mind. We look at persistence, metacognition, flexibility, basically what Jim talked about thinking. So in the student poll, the students will rate themselves on a Likert scale, and we were looking to understand two things: how often they use these habits and how well they use these habits. So we began last fall, and we've seen that the participation has increased every month with the newsletter. At the following month, we show the result of the poll. We talk a little bit more about the habit, and we refer students to more information if they so choose. Then we introduce the next habit of the mind. We're really trying to get them energized about thinking. We've also discovered something along the way. Students don't read emails like we do. And so we're looking at how we can to get our open and response rates up by using texting technology. So stay tuned. The second project that we work on is I'm working directly with Sarah, my supervisor, on creating a career club. We have two community partners, the beloved community of Gaithersburg and Link Generations of Rockville. The students from across all 14 ACES high schools are eligible to join it. The goal of the club is going to be helping the students to develop their goals and interests related to STEM, business, and community engagement. The older adults who are with our partner organizations, they will be running the clubs and bringing their expertise from STEM and business careers. These older adults will be trained with information from the students on how to interact with young people. The Career Club will have, we're very excited about joining this, launching. It will launch next month in the month of March. And I want to add finally that learning about collective impact through the workshops offered through CCMA has really contributed to my VISTA project. I'm always looking for opportunities that we can weave in these concepts with what we're doing. So I hope these two examples helped. Taylor is going to talk now about some of the most important concepts with the Collective Impact Initiative. Taylor?
Thank you so much, Elisa. And like I said before, we are seeing a program here that is just really embracing these ideas of, talking about all attitudes, skills, and understandings necessary for, being somebody who's ready for college, career, or civic engagement loosely. And really embracing it. And of course, her program is clearly very aligned in other ways with these goals. But as she said, there's just always opportunities to weave these concepts into your programs, and just think a little bit more critically about how participants are learning from your programming. And so with that, we are going to have another breakout discussion. And I don't know if Jim wanted to add anything before we go into this, but the questions that we're looking for now that you've kind of heard about the idea of reflective practice as a tool in fostering these attitudes, skills, and understandings, how might we think about developing a reflective practice in our work? Again, given your program, given your structure, where is it going to be easily applicable? Maybe you have a program where you're like, oh, we're already doing this. This is so easy. There's always opportunities after workshops, after this. And maybe you're thinking, I understand the concepts. This seems great, but I'm struggling to see how it could fit in with my program. That is valid as well. And those are the ideas that we're really looking to capture from these breakout rooms and then from our continued conversation. So Sarah's going to put you guys into the breakouts. Please use the same format of having one person from your group scribe and send over the notes in an email. And once again, we'll put the question in the chat for reference. And then Jim, Madeline, anything to get the wheels turning?
Just before we jump in, I would like to say thank you muchly, Elisa, for your comments, for your thinking about, how to expand the work that you're doing, not only within your particular arena, but into your community, and how that might link not only the students that you're working with, but folks that are that have some experience to be able to inform others, because that is really in large part, this connects piece. How do we relate to each other? That's one thought. And then the other thought might be, as we think about doing this work, how might it come in gently, that it doesn't become an onerous kind of, oh my gosh, we got to do this. It's we're already doing this, just like Elisa was already doing. And she went, how, uh, uh, how might we, hmm, incorporate something of a different view? So just a thought as we go into this.
Just like last time, we're going to open up for like 5 minutes. If anybody had, any really insightful comments that you want to share, or, common themes that everybody really identified with in your group, you can unmute and share, drop it in the chat, just to spark a little conversation.
Yeah, I had something, Taylor.
Yes.
I thought in our group we talked a lot about like how adaptive this challenge is, right? So, some issues are adaptive, some issues are technical, right? So some things are, you got to change people's hearts and minds, right? Adaptive. Some things are, you just go find someone with the technical expertise and they can solve that problem. The issue here is it's an adaptive problem, right? The issue here is people don't necessarily, think about work, this kind of work in this way. So, it's one thing to set up the time and, say we're going to do 360 feedback, or, say we're going to, send out a Google form, right? How is this programming? How is this? How is that? But a lot of times, it takes a little bit more than just those kind of technical solutions to the sort of adaptive problem.
Absolutely. That's really insightful. And that kind of goes into what we're going to talk about next, which is, okay, so what now? How do we do this? How do we make it adaptive instead of technical? So wow, thank you.
If I may interject, Devon, in a staff meeting or wherever, said his work was, how do I make this valuable to you? How do I help you understand where this might be important? And I just want to say that's exactly what we're talking about. And so thank you for your report out. But, I'm going back to, how do we work collectively and understand from each other? And your understanding informs the understanding of the work that we are all doing. And just wanted to say, because if we don't capture those moments, then we're all just running in our own different directions. And end the story there.
Anybody else have anything they want to share before we move on?
I was going to share, just for those that are newer to this, just the value. So, you saw those questions on the screen, and I can say that my institution is about 5 to 6 years into making this part of our work, and that we're super learning outcomes focused, and we essentially, everything that we do is followed immediately by those questions, but made more specific to the learning topic and made more measurable. And it at first there was groaning, and it was like, how are we all going to do this? But now, this many years in, it is second nature, and I cannot imagine our work without that learning outcome and sort of reflective practice data that we have. So I would encourage others. It's not as big of a lift. It seems like it is at first, but ultimately it will become like the favorite part of your program, that you have this. And that, I cannot wait to look at the survey data as soon as something ends, to see what the incredibly insightful things students have said, And then just being able to turn that into a numeric picture and see what students are thinking over time. It's super cool. So I want to give a plug for this in actual practice. So.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And it's so important to have people like you who have been doing this work here to share your insights. That's really why we, want to bring these conversations together, is for exactly that kind of insight. And also to reiterate again, yes, this is not meant to be something that's, coming from the top down, like we need reflective practice now. This is just to get you thinking about how you might incorporate it where we as, this backbone institution can be of support in that. And then how, these other institutions and other programs can also be in support of fostering these conversations and getting us all a little bit closer towards that process. So thank you everybody so much for all of your
I think
insights.
actually one more person wanted to say something.
Oh,
or did
yes,
I
please.
maybe misread? Oh, maybe I thought I saw somebody's hand go up at one point, but.
Feel free to come forward.
Okay, wasn't
Okay, sorry about that.
No, my
It's
apologies.
hard with you guys all on the side. I'm like scrolling through. Okay, great. So now we're kind of gonna get into kind of these last two things, shared measurement and continuous communication. And these are really more of the like concrete go forward aspects of this, now that we're all kind of on the same page with, yes, we all have a common agenda. We have mutually reinforcing activities, in some way or shape. And at least we're thinking about how we might fit in with that. And then the way that we continue to think of how we might fit in with that is the continuous communication, fostering conversations like this. And so we're going to talk a little bit about shared measurement and the continuous communication here. And so I think it's important to first actually talk about the continuous communication, because at least for the spring and into the summer, the focus of this continuous communication is really, really to build relationships, build that shared vision, agree on outcomes, and talk about how we might incorporate reflection as a pillar of our work and how reflection helps us target our outcomes, right? So that's really the big goal that we have moving forward right now, is using this continuous communication to talk about how we're going to get this work done, how we might be able to work together to figure out how to incorporate reflection, what outcomes that we want to target, what makes sense as common indicators and outcomes. So we're really looking at you, your programs, your vistas as consultants as we form this program and really solidify this collective impact, because you are the ones doing the work. So you're the ones who know what makes sense as an outcome to look at or not. And then, so important to note here as well is that we've been thinking about this and how can we, get the most out of these conversations. And we've noticed that, out of all of our VISTA programs, you can kind of fit loosely into one of three buckets, being, an education focused program, like somebody who's engaging with K through 12 in some capacity, a community development program where maybe you are bringing together resources, sharing resources generally, and then health or food scarcity. We have a lot of campus pantries that we are supporting as well. And so each of these groups might look at these questions in a different way. So moving forward, what we're going to be doing is actually bringing together these groups to have more targeted conversations. So, as a group of people who are running campus food pantries, how can we incorporate reflection and what are the outcomes that we align with most closely? And having those conversations with people who are doing similar work to you to then bring back into the larger conversation. So that's kind of our vision for moving forward. And of course, that is the establishment of outcomes indicators. We're really looking to you guys and your vistas as what do you think would work for you? And so this is, the shared measurement, of course. It's so linked. I mean, we could just really have one slide for all of this at this point, because shared measurement is what we're looking to establish through the communication. What are the skills, attitudes, understandings that do indicate readiness for college, career, and civic work? How do we measure change in participants? How are we measuring change in communities, or maybe more long-term outcomes or indicators versus short-term versus, at the end of every workshop or anything you do, you give a little reflection and just pulling out buzzwords. It can be as simple as that. So we're really looking to expand this with you guys and figure out what is the process, what are the outcomes, and then here's some questions. And this is just an example of how, we've tweaked the questions to be more widely applicable, maybe for more of a change of community view. And so I'm not going to go into this too much, but essentially, how can we use these questions? How can we tweak these questions for your programs? Which aspects make the most sense? And this is just an example of how, we've already tried to expand this from a change of self to more of a change of community lens. And so this is something that, is to be talked about more in future conversations, of course. And then just to finish off we want to talk about, the long-term vision. Why should you be engaged now? What is it going to have? What is the overall goal in the long term here is really to, have kind of this longitudinal view of what are these outcomes? How are we measuring change in a real way? Not on a personal level, but on a community level. Are you seeing, increased graduation rates? That you can be linked somehow to this, and these are things that your schools, your institutions would be very interested in, and so we're just inviting you to think about what are these long-term outcomes that you and your institution would be interested in seeing, and how can we as the backbone organization help to kind of organize that and push that forward. For some of our K through 12 students, especially, or K through 12 programs especially, this might mean working on data agreements, right? Like, how do we even get this data for, these minors in the public school system? And that's something that, is just an example of something that we can provide as the backbone resource, as the backbone institution, resources and overarching themes. We've already done work on, how to make the data agreements with the county school systems. And these are things that we can bring to the table to help you push the work forward. And then, so the last thing we're going to talk about before we open it up for questions, because I know we're kind of talking at you guys a lot now, but this part here is just to set the stage for going forward, is that we are looking at a research grant for the long term. So once we have all of these structures in place, and we've moved through this year and really establishing our collective vision, the networks, how we're going to go about this, establishing our indicators, the long term hope is that we can receive a research grant. And so this timeline is tentative because, it happens every year, but we're really looking to act on this quite quick in thinking how can we further clarify our work and what we're doing, and how are we contributing to the field in saying that, yes, these concepts are widely applicable. And also just to say, the conversation, I believe it was Jordan who was talking about the indicators early on. We are so open. We really want to engage you in what are these indicators. We have some research, we've got some ideas to bring to the table once we start having these more in-depth conversations, but there's just a plethora of things to consider here, and we're really excited to engage in the conversations and see, what work you have already done that you can bring to the table as well. So with that, I guess, Jim, you want to take it away, Madeline? Anybody?
I'll take it away a bit. Um, and I'm sure that there might be questions, and if there are, we shall certainly entertain them. But I just want to say that, you know, these are two phenomenal vistas that have embraced this work and that, you know, are moving this agenda significantly. And it is an honor, truthfully, for me to be able to let them, you know, present their understanding as opposed to me be talking for 2 hours. And truthfully, if we think back to last Friday, that's exactly what this whole program is about. It's about, you know, engaging in community work, but it's also in giving folks the opportunity to develop themselves and to engage in meaningful work. I know that is not, you know, on necessarily our agenda for today, but it actually is on our agenda for collective impact. And I know that all of us that are on this call are working in the same process, and were you to have the opportunity to, you know, have this collective conversation, that your vistas would be, you know, right in the same spot. But I do not want to lose the opportunity to commend and acknowledge their work and their thinking and our collaborative work to put this together. So that's one thought. Number two thought is, I really hope that, you know, this is the beginning of, you know, some additional conversations. We have talked about, thinking about, you know, how we might move into collective impact movement with academic work, with health and food security, and with community engagement. We've got multiple stuff in the VISTA program that are doing major work in all of those three areas. And what our thinking is how might we share in truth? What might we know from our academic work that would support our community work, that would support our, you know, food and health work? And you folks are the experienced leaders and truthfully the practitioners and scholars. And we're looking at a way to combine that without it being, you know, a boatload of work for you, but just how do we think about this collectively to really push this agenda, as opposed to multiple light bulbs to one light bulb, just to go back to the, you know, to the initial thing. How can we collectively come together to really not only support, but to energize DC, Maryland, and Delaware to do the kind of work that needs to be done? And how might CCMA be the backbone organization to help us think about that collectively, as opposed to think about it individually. And so I'll stop there because that's my that's my ending thought. But I truthfully appreciate your time. I'm going to hopefully engage with you in multiple conversations about how we get this to move forward, because what we're looking to for this spring is to how do we put this together for the July Vista, upcoming orientation, to kind of move this agenda. How might this influence your thinking about who you might want to offer a position to for go forward, so that we're on a similar page, and it's not a restrictive page, it's simply a collaborative page. And that's the whole idea of this. That's the whole idea of this impact idea. So with that said, I can see that Madeline's eyes are moving around, and she's got a thought, and I will certainly allow and ask her to kind of close this out. And thank you very much for your participation. We will be using all of all of the stuff you put in today with our vistas on Thursday as we begin to develop our spring work through our working and thinking and their working and thinking. So this is really a collective process. So thank you much. Madeline, your turn. I'm done.
Thank you, Jim and team.